Well, hello to everyone out there. We're very glad that you can join us here at the International Council for Diplomacy and Dialogue. We have been in operation for a number of years now, and we work with civil societies and in conflict. And our aim is to both foster human rights, foster peace, and at the same time educate our audience as best we can. We are an independent organization. We're not an advocacy organization. Our concern is with the people in each particular conflict beyond the particular interests of the participants. So I'd like to introduce, first of all, our participants, our very distinguished list of participants. I'm Stephen Bronner. I'm a Board of Governors Emeritus Professor of Political Science at Rutgers University, and I'm a co-director with Eric Goslin, who's one of our speakers, of the ICDD. And let me run down our list of participants quickly. And we have Igor Cutler, who is the president and executive director of the Museum of Human Rights and Tolerance. He's a member of our executive committee and also associated with the Center for the Study of Genocide and Human Rights at Rutgers University. Then we have Micheline Ishai, who is a professor, a distinguished professor of international studies and human rights at the Korbel School of International Studies. Her most recent book is The Levant Express, and it's one of the most innovative and interesting works on the Middle East to come out in a very long time. Then we have our distinguished director of the Center for China and US Cooperation at the Korbel School, Shisheng Zhao. We're very glad to have him. And we have also Yaron Gamborg, who's a deputy chief of mission and secretary of the Knesset to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And that's sort of our friend Valère Gabriel Eteka Yemet, who is the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission of the Congo at Brazzaville. Unfortunately, he can't join us. He had actually a government meeting to go to. So Eric will be speaking about, will be taking his place. The way we've organized this is we're going to raise a few issues and raise a few issues, and we're going to have the our group of panelists respond to them. It's going to be a free-flowing dialogue. Whoever wants to speak to the particular issue under concern first can do so. If the panelists want to respond to one another, that's fine, or give their own talk. So the talks will be very, very quick. If people want to ask questions from the audience, please feel free to do that. You can do that, of course, on chat. And so unless there are any concerns, perhaps yes, we'll begin.
Stephen, I would like to add, so we have Cyril Julien.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed.
That's okay.
My mistake.
I'm still alive, don't worry.
That's the main thing.
People must know you.
Oh, I'm sorry, you were off screen.
Is a very specialist in the European and French politician, and I would like to add something about Yaron. Is the vice ambassador, the vice Israeli ambassador in OECD.
All right, that's certainly worth considering. My apologies to both of you. Okay, so unless there's any further ado, we will begin. So I guess the first question, I'll frame it, is the following. It's already clear that there's a shift from a unilateral to a multilateral strategy under President Biden. So the question would be, how do you see its impact and how radical do you think this will prove to be? President Trump had built this foreign policy on America first. And this is just for our audience. This is built on an old fact. It's built on an old, sorry. All right. Sorry about that. So this is built on an old slogan for a movement of the 1940s, which was called America First, and which was known for its isolationism, its not so tacit alliance with dictators, in that case like Mussolini and Hitler. And it involves the extension of sort of secret diplomacy into personalized negotiations, supporting the idea of the great man. The most famous person involved in this was Charles Lindbergh, who, of course, all of you know, and you can find a very interesting, shall we say, interpretation or fictional analysis of this in Philip Roth's The Plot Against America. So I'm just putting that out for purposes of juxtaposition. And let's start off. Who would like to begin? Do I see you raising your hand there, Aaron? Aaron, are you? Well,
you have Micheline who is raising the hand.
Oh, I can't see her. I'm sorry. Micheline, why don't you start?
Story of my life. Okay. There is no doubt that, of course, Joe Biden would return to a multilateral foreign policy. He already made foreign policy statements during his primary, his presidential, and the first day in office that he was going to be 180 degrees different from his predecessor. He already in his 2019 campaign, it was very clear that he wanted to advance the security, both the prosperity, and all the value of the United States by taking immediate steps, which he did the first day of his coming to office, to renew the American democracy and its alliance with its allies, both economic futures and also making sure that the United States is really at the head of the table, just not just a country that follow others. It's not a surprise actually to see when the first day arrived in the Oval Office, there was a portrait of FDR, the Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and a little statue of Eleanor Roosevelt, just sort of emblematic and central to show his reconnections to that pre-Trump era. He's also surrounded by himself with like-minded people. We know that Antony Blinken, as new Secretary of State, has described his perspective that with America, the world will be safer and with its partners and ally. So I think Blinken has written also a thesis just about the United States, its allies. So very strong multilateral. He has Jack Sullivan and his team. Jack Sullivan, who was Biden's national security advisor, who played a key role in negotiating Iran deal during the Obama administration, and is back now on the team of Biden. He also brought in Samantha Power, who is now the new director of the United States Agency for International Development. She's very well known for human rights vision. So that really suggests to us both in words, in visions, and in giving the type of people he's surrounding himself. He is going to be radically different from the previous administration. But having said that, this vision of multilateralism, liberal internationalism will still face major obstacles. And I'm sure here my participants who are from the other side of the Atlantic will probably echo that the US allies after have experienced, the US have experienced for the first time, a post-World War II president who's reject huge US leadership of a united West. And they may have, and I'm not sure, but they may have lost faith that Biden's return to that approach can or will endure.
Thank you very much. Cyril, that leads directly to you. Do you think that's true?
I mean, first of all, I fully agree with Michel in terms of the decision that were taken by Biden. The first day in office, he signed a number of executive orders re-engaging with the world. If I remember correctly, he stopped de-exiting from the World Health Organization and he signed back to the Paris Accord, which for Macron was very important for the European as well. The choice of the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is also quite important for France and for Europe, but for France especially because he's known as a Francophile and probably a Francophone also. So the relationship, the basis of the relationship could be easier. On top of that, most of the key people in the Biden administration used to have very important roles already in the Obama administration. And Biden, as the former chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, has quite an extensive experience in foreign relations and dealing with foreign head of states and governments. So it's a total shift from what Trump used to be, the Make America Great Again. And you mentioned the 40s. It was also going back to the slogan of the Reagan election, which was also yes. Make America Great Again in the late 70s when he ran against Carter. So now, with regards to Europe and France, I think everybody is quite keen to re-engage with the US, but at the same time, I think based on the situation during 4 years with the US and the whole health situation, I think Europe has realized that in order to matter, in order to be able to control its own destiny, it needs to be stronger politically, stronger economically, stronger strategically, and to be able to speak as a single voice. And what I've been told is potentially one of the objectives of Emmanuel Macron, if eventually he wins in 2022, after a 5-year mandate, he'll be just about 50. He may want to run for what could become a more important position in Europe as the first president of Europe, some sort of a confederation based on the Swiss model, to be able to make sure that Europe continues. And it might be easier now that the British are outside.
Okay.
Thank you. Sam?
Yes.
Zhang, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you first of all, for inviting me to join this distinguished group of scholars, especially my distinguished colleague, Professor Micheline Ishii, on this very important panel. You're right, the election has a consequence, and the election of President Joe Biden has changed the dynamics of American foreign policy and also America's relationships with the world. He has declared that America is back and America is ready to lead the world again. I think this is very sincere for him to talk that way. And he has assembled, as my colleague Micheline mentioned, that a very professional with expertise of foreign policy specialists in his government. And he is at least a normal person, or more normal than his predecessor in the White House for the world leaders to approach and to talk to. And he is a sincere try to return to the multilateral approach to work with allies and with other countries, even with rivals, competitors, for sure. However, I think the US is facing a totally different world from 4 years ago. It's very difficult for him, for the US at this time, to restore Americans' image and the leadership. And in fact, this week we see the Davos World Economic Forum. All the world leaders are there. Who is not there is the US. US is not presented in this very important forum because the US is preoccupied by its domestic problems. And also US, the domestic problem, I think for him is a biggest challenge than the global challenge at this time. American democracy is sliding. American economy is in trouble. And also US is the epicenter of the pandemic. It's so awful in the domestic front. He has to put home front in order before he can lead. The US could lead the world. US could engage multilaterally with the world. And also the credibility issue here is because of all those domestic turmoils, the US have a hard time to convince the world in 4 years will not be changed again. The US will not withdraw from the world again. All the commitments US has made to the world will not be taken back again. In the climate change, he signed that executive order. That's great. That's really something US should have continued from 2000, I think 16 or 15, the Paris Climate Accord. But US left. Now US is going back. How can the other countries assure the US will stay there? And the US economic situation capacity to support US power is also declining. I like what he said in inauguration speech. US is going to lead the world by the power of example, not by the example of power. I think US does not have power, nor example at this time to lead the world. Even, I'm working on China here. China is a big rival, big competitor of United States. And China has built a lot of multilateral alliances. Now China is working with Europe so well. Last month, China signed this a very important bilateral China-Europe investment agreement. And the US is not part of that. US is not happy with that. Joe Biden wants to build alliances first, but alliances, how can they be sure to work with US and take side between China and US on these issues? China also last month signed a huge multilateral agreement called RCEP, a Regional Economic Cooperation Partnership. And the US not part of that. 15 countries are there. So US really should work hard on its own home front and also rebuild its credibility by both power and example.
Thank you. Yaron, maybe we can turn to you for the moment. One of the things that's particularly difficult, and this relates to what Sam said previously, and actually Micheline also, is that there's going to be a complete turnover within the, not only within the State Department, but within the federal government in general. This was one of Trump's, I guess, perversely successful acts. He said that he would basically attack or undermine the federal government, the deep state, and he left well over 2,000 positions in different embassies unfulfilled. Now President Biden has brought in 1,000 new people, which is a remarkable number. I wonder what this will have to do, or what kind of effect you think this might have on the kind of person-to-person diplomacy of Trump vis-a-vis Netanyahu. And also our Prince bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. What do you think?
You know, first of all, good morning, or good evening. It's 5 p.m. in Paris. And thank you, Stephen and Eric, of course, for inviting me to take part in this panel. I think it's a very good opportunity to share views, assessments in this very early stage of the new administration. So with your permission, I'm not going to relate to the personal relations. We don't know what they will be. I mean, we can look back and say that, you know, Mr. Biden, President Biden, had a very good personal relations, but now he's in different position. We'll see. It's very premature to say something now. But back to your question about the multilateral approach. Of course, I will agree with all of what has been said. It's very dramatic because the multilateral approach is back. USA is back to the Paris Climate Agreement. Its departure from the WHO is reversed, and it was in a matter of 7 days from the inauguration. It's only 7 days from inauguration. But I would like to make a point about multilateral diplomacy, because multilateral diplomacy, and I'm dealing here with in Paris, as you mentioned, OECD, but also with UNESCO, even though we are not part of UNESCO, but there is a World Heritage Convention, and also I'm dealing with the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. Multilateral diplomacy is a multi-layered thing. So there are organizations of, first of all, of like-minded countries, like NATO, OECD you mentioned. There are also global international agreements and conventions. And of course, there are United Nations in its agencies. So it's 3 different groups. And my arguments is 3 arguments. First, for multilateral diplomacy, especially for the UN system, the 2020 was not an easy year. The challenge of COVID-19 exposed once again 2 major disadvantages of the UN system. First of all, their lack of action when states do not fulfill their obligations. And second, their excessive politicization. The reaction of the WHO to the pandemic crisis drew multiple criticisms and led to the US withdrawal from it. Some may say it was exaggerated. Many will say it was exaggerated, but many also were very critical of WHO. That's why we've heard last year calls for reforms of WHO, and for that matter, similar demands for reform are regularly being raised regarding other organizations. So we should be aware that even when the US is back to these organizations, those organizations are still plagued by the same deficiencies. Second point, in addition to WHO, Trump administration decided to withdraw from 2 other agencies, Human Rights Council and UNESCO here in Paris. Among 2 different reasons, the different reasons of US withdrawal was the anti-Israel bias of those 2 organizations. But I'd like to remind that it was not uniquely President Trump's vision of things. It should be remembered that while it was the Trump administration that withdrew from UNESCO, it was the Obama administration that has frozen payments to this organization because of its excessive politicization and because of its overstepping its own mandate. So the question is how we're going to deal with the situation. Unfortunately, UN agencies are haunted by this phenomenon. And instead of being dealt with at the UN headquarters in New York, the political confrontations just constantly spill over to other agencies. So to sum up, the US will start re-engagement with these organizations. The newly appointed US ambassador to the UN, Ms. Thomas Greenfield, already said yesterday that that US will rejoin UNESCO, will rejoin the Human Rights Council, also UNRWA. Let's hope that this will become an opportunity to fix the deficiencies and to push for reforms inside those agencies. And we already see a clear return of the United States to a broad engagement with the international community through multilateral frameworks. We should see if this will solve the problems inherent in the functioning of some of those organizations. So this is the perspective I would like to share with you from my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Eric, do you want to say something about either Israel or Middle East or Africa?
So Yaron is here to speak about the Middle East, but I'm going to speak about Africa. I'm very sorry because I received a phone call hour ago from Valère Gabriel Eteka-Yemet. He is the Minister of Human Rights in Congo, but he has a meeting with about the COVID. So I prepare in 1 hour a small paper about Africa. So I'm going to read to you, but first of all, we have in the panel a very famous African personality,
Yes.
is Baba Femi Badejo. So if he wants to add something at the end, it would be an honor for us to hear him. The second point, I'm very happy to see all the people in the panel because we're Israeli, we have Arabs people, I see, we have the head of the people from Ahmadiyya, I see, and people from all over the world, so I'm very happy. So I will read to you what I wrote about Africa. In 4 years of the White House, Donald Trump has not made a single official trip to Africa. Trump had no interest in Africa. His only obsession was China. Land of shit. All of Africa, remember the sentence attributed to Trump to describe some countries of Africa. President Joe Biden has committed himself to restoring American leadership globally. As you know, 70% of the African aspire to live under democratic governments. The African continent has actually not been a major theme of candidate Joe Biden, but during his campaign, he published a document for the African diaspora. He spoke of a more equitable relationship, the revival of the yearly program Youth African Leaders established under Obama. Before the election, Biden and Harris formed a team to think about the African policy. The group recommended several points. A real engagement with Africa. There would be much more consultation with Africans in decision-making about the continent. The new administration would support for democratization and civil society would be put back on the table. Issue of technical assistance in conflict resolution should be a priority. Joe Biden's first congratulatory call from Africa, from South Africa president. On the first day in office, Joe Biden repealed the Trump administration 2017 immigration restriction known as the Muslim ban. In Africa, this affected Somalia, Nigeria, Sudan, Eritrea, Egypt, Libya, and Tanzania. Last year, in an interview with the Africa Report, Harris said she believed the new administration would understand the importance of development assistance and the importance of being a strong and real partner. The first visible figure for the American continent will be Antony Blinken, the new head of diplomacy. For this French-speaking man who works with the Clinton and Obama administration, the first African issue to be dealt with should be the internet conflict in Ethiopia. Biden promised to organize a summit of African heads of state, as Barack Obama did in 2014. For the last point, when you read the African press, you can see a great hope of the African people, but a mistrust of African leaders. We believe in the past that the Obama administration would change the relationship between Africa and the United States, and this was not the case. Thanks. Ruben.
Right. Yes, Cyril,
Cyril,
please.
Cyril, but yeah.
Eric, I'd like to add something about the Middle East. As it happens, in parallel to our conversation, there is an online event in Riyadh called the Future Investment Initiative, which normally takes place at the end of October, but for obvious reason, they pushed it to yesterday and today, and because of COVID, they've had to keep the date, but do it as a video conference. What I thought was interesting was the absence of key people from the Biden administration. You had the usual suspects, obviously all the big bankers, the hedge funders, the private equity guys, but no one from the Biden administration. And also read recently the fact that the Biden administration has decided to stop sending further arms munitions to Saudi Arabia vis-a-vis the war in Yemen, and also apparently the agreement with UAE in relation to the F-35 seems to be on hold. So it would appear that the close relationship between the key member of the GCC and the US administration is potentially shifting, a relationship which was clearly based on a personal relationship between Mohammed bin Salman and Jared Kushner. So what will happen next? No one knows. What we know is obviously, and we can rejoice for that, personally, I'm fairly critical of the Trump era and the Trump administration, but we have to acknowledge the fact that we thought the Trump administration, there wouldn't be an Abraham agreement.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And
Stephen,
just for
Yaron.
Yeah, I would like really to grasp the opportunity to discuss a little bit Middle East. It's just a few remarks. As I've said, it's too early to grasp the full extent of the change, but let's maybe focus on some elements that could shed some light on what we could expect in this when we're talking about continuity or rupture between the new administration and the previous one. So, and for this, we should look for three things, I believe. The record of the new president on the Middle East and his declarations, promises that he'd made during his campaign. Then we should look at the legacy of the previous administration, and we should then go to the most important thing, which is what is the long-term interest of the United States in the region. So if you go for the first point, which is President Biden has a long record of policy making, policy implementation, both as senator and vice president of the United States. So he's closely familiar with the region. He understands the challenges, complexity. When it comes to Israel, for example, Biden's friendship and the ironclad commitment, this is his words, to Israel's security was proved constantly in the past in words and in deeds. Now, he confirmed this commitment also during his election campaign. And also, by the way, when he was asked about the US recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moving of the American embassy to Jerusalem, he said that he wouldn't reverse this decision. Also, on Iranian issue, his position is also very clear. He said if Iran returns to strict compliance with nuclear deal, the US would rejoin the agreement as a starting point to strengthen and extend it. I'm trying to be very specific about what he exactly said. Also, addressing other issues of concern, that's what he said, meaning basically the ballistic missile program and the regional expansion of Iran. Now, the new Secretary of State, his name was already mentioned, Antony Blinken, he has already announced that the US administration will consult with the regional allies on the question of Iran. As you understand, Israel, but also so many Arab countries, especially in the Gulf region, see in Iran the biggest threat to regional stability. And we, of course, will share our perspective with the new administration. Now, and here it comes to the legacy of the previous administration, or I would say even administrations. because Trump administration, first of all, he was able to achieve an important breakthrough in the Middle East. I have in mind, of course, the Abraham Accords and establishing diplomatic relations with UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. And President Biden, during his campaign, saluted this achievement and promised to continue this effort. Of course, on the other hand, we have situation in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Lebanon, other countries that is very, very complicated. In the last 10 years, since the Arab Spring began, it's already 10 years since it began, new players entered the regional scene and their influence cannot be ignored. The most conspicuous examples are, of course, Russia and Turkey. They're deeply involved in Syria and Libya, to name just these two countries. Of course, Iran continues its malign activities in Syria and Lebanon. Nor Obama administration nor Trump administration were not able to stop this, especially when it comes to the regional expansion of Iranian regime. So those challenges will require significant attention from the administration. And my last point, the reason for American engagement in the Middle East is the US long-term interest in the area. So we have a national security interest, political interest, fighting terrorism and extremism, providing stability on the energy markets, supporting allies. Those are cornerstone of the US engagement in the region. And what if we can predict, if we're talking about predictions, new administration is not expected to disengage from the region, quite the opposite. But Biden administration, like Obama's and Trump administrations, will pursue American interests in the region mostly through diplomatic engagement, keeping military options only to the worst case scenarios and extreme situations. I think in America, people kind of fed up with the wars. And of course, we should expect significant efforts to find a solution to the Iranian problem. And it's too early to say how it will be achieved. As I've said, it's a little bit early. So excuse me for being a little bit long, but I think the situation in the Middle East is very important and indicative of the future steps of the Biden administration regarding the foreign policy. Thank you.
Yeah, Yaron, I have a question.
Yeah.
The new administration, what I understood, they want to put a little bit the focus on the Palestinian people. And Trump didn't do that. We know that. So do you think that if the new administration will put the focus on the Palestinian, on the Fatah, not on the Hamas, do you think that it can be a chance for a peace or a new relation between Israel and Palestinian?
Eric, thank you for your question, but let me correct you a little bit. I really don't think, not as a diplomat, I'm saying this as an Israeli, an ordinary Israeli. I don't think that the Palestinian issue was not dealt by the Trump administration. I think before we've seen this Abraham Accords, I remember just exactly a year ago, I think it was exactly a year ago, that we had a deal of the century, it was called by President Trump himself, about Israel and Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Let me remind you this, that I mean, there was a plan that Trump's counselor, Mr. Kushner, was working for, I would say, 2 years, something like that, with many other people engaged. This is true, that the Palestinians rejected it from the beginning till the end. And we can ask whether it was smart, not smart, but this is not about judging someone. It's just to say that in his way, by the way, very different way, and very different from what was tried for many, many times and did not succeed. Trump's administration was trying to engage Israelis and Palestinians. Now, that's why I really see a continuity in the fact that the new administration will also deal with this issue. Of course, they will come from, I believe, from a different perspective. So many people coming from the Obama administration to Biden's administration probably will have some impact and influence on this. However, I think everybody is now and will be very cautious. we should see how exactly it will all play out. As you know, there are problems within the Palestinian Authority. Gaza is, we are talking about actually two different and separated entities. And even the elections that didn't take place for 10 years in the Palestinian Authority. So we don't know exactly what is the level of legitimacy. I don't call them on Palestinians to do what we are doing as Israelis, because we have elections already as a kind of national sport. We have already fourth election in 2 years, just in 2 months from now. That's not the point. But I believe that we should be very cautious and about predictions exactly what will happen. What is clear that the new administration will be involved in this issue. This is for sure.
Thank you. Now, before getting to Igor Cutler, who I'm sure will have something to say about Russia and its position in this new situation with this new regime, especially given the relationship between Trump and Putin. One of our audience would like to make a comment, and that's Babafemi Badeo, who has been an ambassador, has been a human rights leader, has been a political leader for actually the entire continent. Bafemi, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen. There isn't much that I want to add to what Eric has kindly put together. It's like we are thinking along the same line, because after I got on the seminar, he had indicated that if I want to say something, and I started trying to jot to myself, then he went ahead and said everything I wanted to say. More or less. Now,
Great
but the crucial thing is that we should separate substance from symbols. And when we look at the Trump administration did not think Africa mattered at all. And his legacy was that he didn't pretend about it. He more or less called all of them shithole, and decided that he was going to clamp immigration against quite a number, including Nigeria, the most populous on the continent. And the economic relationships continued with the Trump administration. There wasn't anything that I can see that differs from Obama in that respect. The Trump administration continued with the same level of aid to Africa within the range of 7 to 9 billion since the time of Clinton. He maintained that. But at the symbol level, yes, as Eric pointed out, he didn't pretend to undertake a visit to the continent of Africa. When people were complaining about that, his wife came on a visit and had some tourism in a number of countries. There wasn't anything substantive attached to any of that. Of course, there was the obsession with China, which had also been mentioned, that trying to tell the Africans that they should stay away from China. But that is very difficult because the Chinese were actively providing a number of loans and whatever the Africans or African intellectuals may be saying about that in terms of the futuristic situation with respect to those loans. They welcomed the loans that were displacing the influence of the United States in all this. Will and of course, at the it has also been pointed out at the multilateral level, the entities, the agencies and entities that some of which benefit Africa with respect to humanitarian support and other things, Trump felt that they should be undermined for different reasons that has to do with his own perception of American interests. Now, the question is, will all these be different under Biden? Yeah, there might be reasonable symbolic differences that we should be expecting from the Biden administration. To start with, is the appointments that Biden is making into his cabinet. You do find that Linda Thomas Greenfield, who is going into the UN, spent a reasonable portion, if not most of her career in Africa. I knew Linda, I guess 1988 or 87, thereabout, when she was a young woman in the American embassy. From there, she was in South Africa. She was everywhere, came back into Liberia during the conflict in Liberia as ambassador of the US to Liberia. So you might have a situation in which that sort of a cabinet post allows some effort in trying to symbolically engage with Africa on the part of the Biden administration. There was the Nigerian lady that was going for the DG of the WTO that Trump emotionally blocked, in spite of the fact that she actually carries an American passport in addition to her being a Nigerian, carrying a Nigerian passport. And I think Nigeria actually fielded her for the post. But the totality of the world supported her except for Trump. One may expect that Biden would reverse that and comply with the pressure of the world to support an American, as opposed to the fact that this is an African American and maybe the type that he wasn't interested in seeing. Yes, Stephen, I would round up and just maybe have the opportunity to come back if it is necessary. Thank you very much for having this on.
Just before taking on Igor, to emphasize your point, I was in Sudan in I think it was about 2010, and we had the opportunity to see the Merwan Dam in northern Sudan, which is the greatest dam apparently outside of the Aswan Dam in Egypt. And it was as if you were looking at a city. And this was entirely built by the Chinese. And the reason it was given was that they were the only ones that the Sudanese could deal with. So your point is well taken. Igor, let me...
Sorry, Stephen, before that, we are going to give the floor to Igor. I think we can, because we spoke about the Middle East, and we have in the panel the ambassador of Ahmadiyya in UN Geneva, Mehmood Anwar. And perhaps you can, I would ask you a question. What do you expect from the new administration for the minorities in Arab country or in Pakistan?
Yes, thank you very much, Eric, for inviting me in your wonderful meeting. So as many people know about the difficulties which we are facing in Pakistan, being a member of Ahmadiyya community, and this is because of our belief. And even in Algeria, we are facing some troubles in Algeria and many other Islamic countries also. And we are putting our perspective and the problems which we are facing and we are demonstrating peacefully, and we are showing our, concern that our members who are facing really trouble in many countries, being a member of Ahmadiyya community. Like Eric, you know that we are a very peaceful community, and we are against the violence and peaceful teaching of our leader, And when you translate, the Islam means also a peace. But if we understand, we have to show also our actions peacefully. And that's what I'm doing since many years in the UN in Geneva. I'm also HRC, the member of Human Rights Commission, and representing my community in Geneva. And yeah, this is it. Hopefully for the good.
Hopefully for the good. Thank you very much, Mahmoud. We're very honored that you're here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So let me turn to Igor Kotler, who, as I said, is the president and executive director of the Museum of Human Rights and Tolerance, and who is on our a particularly valued member of our executive committee.
Thank you, Steve. Still good morning and good evening to everyone. And on the personal note, let me put this way. Steve and Eric asked me to talk about Russia. I do not represent Russia. I live in the United States and I'm a US citizen. I don't have any Russian citizenship or something like that. But because of my, say, origin, as well as language skills, I follow the country, and I would like to talk a little bit about the view from Russia. It's not my view, it's view from Russia. It's two different views, okay? And just to remind very briefly that probably we have three major players in the world, the United States, China, and Russia. Russia is still one of the major players because of its huge country, rich with new resources, and especially with enormous nuclear arsenal. Okay, so, and very briefly, during the elections of 2016, many Russians and Russian politics supported Trump. Why they supported Trump? There were different reasons. The reasons were that he's conservative. The reasons were that he is realpolitik or alleged realpolitik. Okay, he would follow this idea. About 46% of Russians hoped for reset in relations between Russia and the United States. However, during the 4 years of Russian administration, these hopes faded away, okay, to many extent, and America continued to occupy the place to be practically enemy number one for Russia. I'm talking about Putin's administration, his government and authorities. And during the electoral campaign here in the United States, about 60% of Russians, there were polls, supported Trump, 8% Biden, and practically the vast majority, the rest didn't care. Why the government and the population didn't care much? Because they did not believe, and they do not believe, that the Biden administration would reset any relations with Russia. The relations would improve. Vice versa, the vast majority of Russian analysts and especially government analysts consider that the relations between Russia and the United States would worsen even more. Okay, so they don't have much hope that the situation would improve in these relations, and about unilateral and multilateral approach, the concept is the following. by the Putin's administration, that America traditionally intervenes in other people's or in other countries' affairs. Okay, this is like hegemon. So under Trump, it reduced, but not so much. Under Biden, they will interfere even more. Okay, this is why Russia has to react. And for example, this is the justification or explanation why Russia is so active in Syria, for example. Its reaction to American intervention. So from this point, Putin's administration and many Russians, and unfortunately many of them support Putin, consider that the new administration wouldn't bring any resolution in Russian-American kind of tensions. Okay, the tensions probably would grow, will grow even more. And just it's very brief kind of report and very brief analysis. And on the kind of a little bit almost humoristic note, I would like to mention one more thing, that Russians, of course, followed the Abrahamic Accord, okay, and the Russian media some time ago announced that Russia would participate in that, being a broker between Syria and Israel, okay, that Russia is negotiating bringing Syria and Israel together, okay. I don't have any proof for that. I'm just reflecting what Russians are saying about that. That, in other words, they want to show that they continue to be a very important part for the solution in the Middle East. And this is very unfortunate, of course. What is Russia also afraid of? Let me finish up with this: that the Biden administration, being more active on the international affairs, would strengthen its participation in Ukraine, would try to bring Ukraine to more to the European or Western international orbit. That the new administration would influence countries around former Soviet republics or former Soviet countries like Belarus or Moldova or Central Asian or the countries of the Caucasus with their conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So, in other words, Russia as a player is on defense here, or with kind of negative attitude toward to the new administration. How it should be solved? I don't have any recipe for that. It's not my work, but unfortunately, this player is not so in the same team with the new administration. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Micheline, I know you wanted to say something. Unless I'm wrong.
You did. I was actually going to make some additions with respect to the Middle East. And I know that Yaron Gambor was converging both the nuclear deal and the Abraham Accord. So I can take it either places.
Why don't we just why don't you lay out the issue for the nuclear agreement with Iran, because we're going to turn to that next. So,
okay. So we know that the 2015 nuclear deal was an attempt to end the sanctions on Iran in exchange for verifiable preventions on Iran acquisitions of nuclear weapons. And we also know that Trump called it a horrible deal and just withdrew from the deal. And now we are back with Biden's trying to renegotiate it. And the question is really, can that deal succeed, and to what extent will it succeed? We know also that the Middle East is really now the same region as the one that was left by the Obama and the Biden administrations, and then Biden will certainly face new contingency that were not there 4 years ago. So it will be supported by world power, but it will need to be renegotiated even from the perspective of the Biden administration. I mean, think a bit from different side. On the Iranian side, Tehran will initially have a posture of being willing, but also resistant, because after all, we know that there were quite a number of tensions that have grown dramatically between Iran and the United States, first because of the returns of the sanctions, then the US assassinations of military commander Qassem Soleimani, and recently with the assassination of the Iranian nuclear physicist. So the hardliners are really tightening their grips on powers, and they're looking for economic compensation to address the economic hardship that was imposed by the US sanctions and now by COVID-19. And at the same time, they really feel threatened by the new security cooperations between Israel and several Arab states. So this is on their side. On the side of the Israeli and the JCC country, we are witnessing certainly concern over a softer approach to the Iran nuclear deal by the Biden administration. At least that's the way they think about that. And the new coalitions between Israel and the Arab states really demand greater involvement in renegotiating the 2015 agreement. There have been already pressures with the Biden administration to include restriction. And I think that my colleague Yaron mentioned it, restriction on Iran's missiles as a precondition for return to the Iran deal. And some observers observe that this position is indeed hardening. And then we have the United States, which found himself in a very interesting place. The combinations of the Abraham Accord and Iran deepening economic woes may now give Biden added leverage with Iran. In the sense, so we will see that the UAE is eager to restore Iran's compliance with the nuclear agreement, and we're going to be trying to persuade Iran to not to squander any opportunity with the Biden administrations for 4 years down the road. But the United States is going to find itself in that positions, on the one hand, sort of freeze a little bit, put some cold waters on the Abraham Accord. That could be consisted as a leverage in entering the nuclear deal. On the other hand, Iran is in a weaker position. So all in all, Biden might find himself in a better position than he thought he was entering this process.
Well, thank you very much. So I would just like to add one thing before turning it over to whoever wants to speak. One of the things that's usually not taken into account, especially in the United States, is how in response to the Trump administration, the Iranian government has shifted right. This is no longer the administration of Rouhani and Zarif. And so I guess one of my questions is, maybe whoever wants to start on this, is how does one deal with this? Because it's clear on the one hand that there's a strong desire to negotiate from remnants of the previous administration, but there's just as strong a belief that the nuclear accord was a disaster for Iran from the standpoint of the Revolutionary Guards and Khamenei, the supreme leader. So that's my question for you, if I can throw it in. What do you think?
Is that to me?
No, I was gonna ask Yaron, and then we can come back to you, Micheline.
Stephen, I just didn't, there was some problem on the line, so I just heard part of your question. If you don't mind, just the second part, if you don't mind to repeat the last one.
Just simply, there are remnants of the old regime from Rouhani and Zarif, who are obviously committed to a deal with the United States. And in my opinion, that is that will run relatively smoothly if the demands for concessions aren't too extreme. I can see that. My question for you is, what do you see as the likelihood of negotiations and the possibility of negotiations, and what are the implications for Israel of the fact that the Iranian regime has moved to the right uh, that the Revolutionary Guards and the Supreme Leader Khamenei view the deal as a disaster because of what Iran has gone through, and because its national ambitions have been humiliated. So you have two forces at odds with one another in Iran, while this deal is supposedly, the New Deal is supposedly in progress. That's my question.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. Yes, of course, this is one of the more complicated questions, and I really, it was Micheline had a very interesting analysis. I would be happy to talk to her, maybe even after, just to develop this. But what is, as you understand, for Israel, and of course, and this also can include the Gulf countries, most of them, if not all of them, definitely UAE and Saudi Arabia. We see it as a big threat for all of us. Now, this play in Iran between two supposedly different forces, of course, always existed and exists now. There will be elections in Iran.
Yes.
In June, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Now, so President Biden already recognized that the original agreement should be fixed. He said that he wants to build on an existing deal with a new agreement to tighten and extend the nuclear constraints on Iran. He also wants to address missile program. Now, he also promised to confront Iran's human rights record. By the way, this is kind of goes for all of his agenda. By the way, back to what Igor said about Russia, the human rights record also in Russia, for example. So we've seen already the Biden administration already responding to what is happening with Navalny case and all the. So this is this agenda that will be will have high priority. Now, about the Iranian deal, first of all, with the existing deal, there is already some problem because the agreement has already started to expire. You know, the deals, they have the sunset clause, what they call the first so-called sunset clause, which is actually the termination of the restrictions on transferring conventional arms to Iran. This sunset clause already came into effect in October last year. If it not was for an executive order issued by the previous administration that was threatening sanctions against countries that they will transfer weapons to Iran, such arms sales would already be underway. So, and what is alarming is also the International Atomic Energy Agency has evidence that Iran is concealing undeclared nuclear material, activity sites. In November 2020, the agency reported that Iran's stockpile of low enriched uranium has swollen to nearly 2,000 pounds, 12 times more the limit set by the 2015 deal. And now we have also Iranian lawmakers, more conservative one, back to your question, that are working on legislation requiring Iran to accelerate production and kick out the UN nuclear inspectors if sanctions of the country's oil and banking sectors are not lifted. And I think they even said lifted by early February, if I'm not mistaken. So now, but President Biden said he has no illusions about Iran and pledged that Iran will not have nuclear weapons. So this goal is shared by Israel, our allies in the region and beyond. This was the goal of Obama administration. Now it was the goal of Trump administration, and this is the goal of Biden administration. So how it's going to play out externally in Iran, it's difficult to say, but we believe, in Israel, and our position hasn't changed. We think that there should be maximum pressure on Iran, as it was in the past, and now we think this is the right way to deal with that because we have so many different things. It's not just a nuclear program; it's also a ballistic missile program. It's also the fact that Iranians having free hand in installing their troops and their bases in Syria and in other countries. So all of this should be addressed. How it could be addressed with the new agreement, we don't know. But this is a big issue. That's why what I've said in the beginning, it will be very indicative of how we will be dealing with this issue, important not only for Israel, but actually for the regional stability and all the countries, Arab countries that are with us, more vocally or less vocally. I don't know if I addressed
Yes,
your questions exactly, but I think that you understand the complexity of this, and I think that we will see more of it even in the in the coming weeks and months, unless we will be able to a little bit calm down the situation. But the pressure on Iran, we believe this is the right way to continue with this, because thanks to what we've had in the last months and years, Iranians could have less of involvement in Syria. They had they were more limited, they were more restrained, they have less money for this. Once we don't have sanctions, they will have all the money flowing, and they will be, but in this money, they will not go to the Iranian citizens. That's, I can promise you. This is the best prediction I can. This money will go to all of those missiles, nuclear program, and more of expansions and their proxies in other countries. Sorry for being maybe
all
too
right.
long.
Micheline, you want to say anything in response?
Yes, but it was going to take me to the Abraham Accord, and I know that the Cyril Julian was raising his hand. So if it is in relationship to what exactly Yaron was saying, so maybe I would defer and then just pick it up after. So
I mean,
Steve, where are you?
I'm not a specialist like you seem to be of Iran, but my understanding was that the approach that was fought either in the US or in Europe was, if we were to push too hard against the Iranian government, that might favor the conservative as opposed to the more quote unquote liberal side of the country, and stop the fact that the liberal side little by little is trying to take over. That was my understanding. Now, with regard to the money, the other understanding I have, my background is finance. I have a little bit of knowledge about what's happening in the Middle East and in Dubai, which was there. There's no one from Dubai. I'm not going to insult anyone. Basically, the real estate boom in Dubai was driven to start with by money laundered from Iran, from the big families of Iran. And as far as Iran himself and Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader, he has means of getting his own funding separated from the country's budget. So as far as all they're trying to do, he has amassed a large fortune to be able to help him to continue what they're trying to do. So based on that, maybe now the approach is to put Iran in a corner and to stop them or the government doing what they've been doing for 40 years.
Interesting.
I think Mr. Sen want to say something.
Oh, of course. Mr. Sen?
Mr. Sen.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. You are talking about Middle East, which is not my field, so I just
That's
try
right.
to be silent to learn. So if you want to shift to a different area,
I think your comrade, your colleague has something.
Mr. Sen.
Okay.
no, as a
Yeah,
bridge,
Dr.
as
Dr.
a
Toy, and I guess you're talking about me. And
Yes.
Yes.
yeah, so thank you very much for organizing this great event. I think the topic is about election in the world is such important, but it's so broad. There is no way we can cover everything, every region. As Dr. Zhao said, and both of us are from China originally. And I think at this moment, we have so many difficult issues, challenges, but the US and China relationship is a core of all relationship. if the new administration cannot deal with China strategically and in a friendly way, deal with in a peaceful way, that will have implication for everything we are doing. So I think everybody has a specialty interest in Middle East, Russia, Africa, whatever. But because China is so big, so powerful, I think maybe it's just a suggestion. Maybe we should have divided the different topics in the future, focus on certain regions to mix every. I think it's a beginning of something big. That's very nice. Get everybody to know each other. But in the future, may have a smaller focused discussion. That would be very productive. That's my suggestion. And then I have one thing. I think the biggest change for US and the world now is nobody is can trust America, even with the Biden administration. Why? Because internally, we're so divided. Who knows what could happen in 4 years if Biden or Democrat cannot win the heart of Americans? Because you got 70 million votes who voted for Trump, who are still there, and they're still fighting, doing all kinds of things, even talk about impeachment. So domestic politics, those issues cannot be separated from the international issues. So the world biggest concern for most of the people I talk to, how can I trust the Biden administration? Even you have good will and good heart, but once you're gone, and the Trump can come back, the extremists, I'm not going to say Republican, but extremes can come back to dominate the discussion and to go back to the policies Trump did during the last 4 years. So how can we deal with that? Question for those experts and everybody. I have no expertise in this field. I'm only working on economics, but that's based on my conversation from people I know. So how you are going to respond to this kind of question?
That was actually going to be the next question. So let me just hang on to that, because
okay,
we are together on this. But let's see if we can finish this with Iran, and then we'll move to exactly. We're going to close up with exactly the question you raised. Now, does anybody have anything else they want to say with Iran?
Just briefly to bring back China to these conversations, I was just going to say that one should remember that 400 billion, I believe, the Chinese provided to the Iranian in order to lessening the sanction, and that has been sort of created more leverage on the Iranian to wait and see what is going to happen. So China is a partner in the games of what will happen to Iran, and so it's worth bringing it up, since Zhao and Sun were suggesting that we were out of it. I don't think that's
no. I'm not saying that I'm not saying we're out of the Iran picture, because Iran is a partner. Some American was the evil of access with China. They're part of access, but China can play a very constructive role in dealing with Iran. If we forget about the China issue, and the Iran won't be dealt with peacefully. And plus, China has the Taiwan issue. And those are everything is a part of the puzzle. We need to move every pieces together. And in a magical way, put them together, become a complete piece. Otherwise, it's broken. It's broken, just like a divided world, right? Fragmented. So I'm not saying we're out of the Middle East. No, China does have strategic issues in Middle East, everywhere. That's why I say, we should maybe focus on something piece by piece, and then find a piece of them together and come up with a better picture of the world, maybe better suggestion to the Biden administration, or make prediction, whatever we want to do. That's just my
part of the response, I guess, would be that the new multinational strategy is going to have to deal with new multinational problems. And to that extent, it's very difficult to disentangle one from the others. Yep, Micheline?
I can speak. I didn't raise my hand, but I really can speak if you want me to. Are we still on which issue? Can you gear us?
Unless somebody else wants to speak on Iran, we'll let Micheline finish. and then move on to an issue close to my heart. Anybody have anything they want to say?
On Iran?
Yeah.
Well, it's very intersected with the Abraham Accord, you know, as we know, and I think that Yaron Gambok was talking about that. We have seen already, and I probably will echo here briefly, that the Biden administration will encourage somehow the Abraham Accord, but with a caveat. This time he will try, and as he has done yesterday, to freeze some of the agreement that was accompanying the Abraham Accord, the arms, the sale of arms supply for Morocco, the UAE, Bahrain, and other places. It really has the capacity to militarize the region and to create a race for more weapons, with Iran also trying to increase its extractions of uranium. This is not a good agreement if it was an agreement in and of itself, but it has the potential to be a springboard for something bigger than it is. And that's where I want to suggest here is that if Biden is really serious about enduring peace, and not just by the developing an agreement or renegotiating the agreement with Iran, and also looking at, on the other side, sort of Israeli-Sunni alliance, it should put pressure, I would say, to the Israeli government to return to the peace negotiations with the Palestinian, pointing out that the Abraham Accord has bolstered Israeli security in the region. It has created greater confidence that used to be in the past. And it could even barter Israeli influence on the shape of a revised Iran nuclear deal in exchange for a return to peace negotiation with Palestinians. So I think that is central, not just for the Palestinians, central as an enduring peace, because the Palestinian question is a lightning rod in the Arab streets, and the lack of attention to the Palestinians will ultimately challenge, I believe, the Arab autocrats who have now moved closer to Israel. So overall, I don't think that should be just pushed aside, despite the divisions that exist within the Palestinians, West Bank and Gaza. That has to be, something has to happen, and hopefully can push back the wheel of history forward.
Yeah.
Stephen,
Can I say a few words here? Can I
yes,
say
Stephen.
2 words?
Sorry.
I
Okay.
think because the Trump administration has created so many traps for the new administration, my suggestion for the Biden administration is, for any executive orders from the federal government, I would just cancel them all for the time being. Let's re-examine one piece. Go back 4 years ago. Go back to the end of Obama. We don't know what's going on with those so many traps. And Biden, the new president, has done a lot during that first weeks or two by canceling, declaring, and all those old ones declare new one. But there's so many traps created by the previous administration, even at the last few days. It's like minefields, from the new administration. Why don't we just clean up? Evaluate all those executive orders during the Trump administration. That's my, including Iran, nothing else.
Starting. Clearly, there have already been 30. So, but let me turn to Eric and then Cyril.
Yes, only I want to give a precision, not to go in the debate with the Palestinian or the Iranian, but when we're speaking about the Palestinian, it's very difficult to speak about the Palestinian because there is no one people of Palestinian. We have two already separate people of Palestinian. I will give you an example. When I was in Bahrain, I spoke many times with the Minister of the Culture, Palestinian Culture, or with the Ambassador of Palestine in Bahrain. And we discussed about peace process, how we can go on with Israel. And the answer was from the ambassador, okay, it's very nice what we said, but we can't do anything. because the Hamas will not accept that. I know that is a problem. And when you are, Micheline, in the field, when you speak in Gaza with the people, or when you are in Ramallah, you will feel really the difference between the two peoples, And many people, there is like a civil war between them. And when you speak with ambassadors, you will see a Palestinian ambassador, you will feel how it's difficult to speak with them. And I'm not a fan of Netanyahu, really not. And all the time I said to the Palestinian, you play for Netanyahu, because Netanyahu will say, look, I cannot speak with, I cannot speak with the Palestinian, because if I say yes to the first one, the second would say no. So before speaking to the Palestinian, they have to speak between them.
So can I just say a couple of things, but I don't want to just broaden up the conversation
No.
to the really Palestinian question. So
No, it's not
I
the
just want
question.
to start with the end. When I speak to an Israeli, I also speak, there's a yes and a no, and sometimes many yeses and many no. So let's not go through this cultural agreement discussion. With respect to the people in Ramallah, I end up being a lot in Ramallah, and I do talk to people from Hamas. My God, I should be now on the blacklist. And I do realize that there are people who don't speak the same language. And in fact, if there was to be an election, and there will be an election in May in the West Bank, there will probably be a continuing feud between Hamas and the PA. I have absolutely no misconceptions about that. But since we are under the aegis of the ICDD, we do think that enemies should be talking with each other about peace and not the other way around. I think Eric Goslan is the one who mentioned that in somewhere. And that's the reason I will just push with that particular argument and always think that there are possibilities. There are new opportunities in the region. There are also opportunities that could go the wrong way. But here's something that I would like to bring to your attention on a positive way. And I said before that the Abraham Accord should be seen as a springboard, not just and become ultimately a people-to-people peace approach, which is not the case yet. But of great interest and currently under discussion, there is a railway project that is connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Persian Gulf. And to me, those are type of project that really can create enduring peace, not just in the Israeli-Palestinian issues, but the overall region, because it will stimulate trade, it will stimulate development, it will strengthen the economy, an economy in which 40% of the Arab population is really suffering from since 2011. Certainly the Palestinian has been just caught in that, and it's an underpinning of progress and peace in the region. I mean, there are many forms of cooperation that could involve trade, renewable energy, tourism, all that could be part of pushing forward a program that has been mainly focusing on security cooperation. And that is usually the problem. If you can't take the step, 2 or 3 steps beyond that, then we're going to talk about arms race and why the Abraham Accord is a bad idea. If we're going to take the 2 or 3 steps beyond and make sure that they happen, then we're going to talk about perhaps a potential detente between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And then we're going to perhaps be able to discuss about economic developments that can be created, so also the Palestinians take advantage of it. So there is another way of thinking about that outside of the box and not returning to those old models between bringing, Palestinian, whether they are from the West Bank and Gaza, and then the third party, the Israeli, and then the fourth party, the European and the European quartets or the quartet. I think that we could do better than that and put on the table interesting projects. So, sorry, leaving it.
Can we jump in with a short remark?
Hang on. This is, by the way, the core of Micheline's book, The Levant Express. And let me again suggest everybody take a look at that. Now, from the audience, Justine LaBelle has something to say, and then I'm going to turn to Cyril, if that's all right. Justine, where are you? Ah, Justine has disappeared.
No, she has to open the micro. Yes.
You hear me right now?
Yes, now you're here. Very good. Hi.
All
Justine,
right.
members of
Yes.
our executive committee as well. You had something you wanted to say.
No, I have nothing to say. I'm just very glad to be here and listen everything. It's just really perfect.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think Yaron wanted to answer to.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah,
take Cyril first.
If I can
because-
just
Sorry,
make
maybe.
a quick comment. The first time I came to Israel was in 2000. At the time, I was invited by Yair Shamir, the son of the former prime minister. And I remember at the time the fact that the area was quite peaceful, and traveling to Palestine and meeting lots of people, and their main concern was to try to find financing for their projects. And I have no solution. It's one of the most complex area in the world, but from a Frenchman perspective, I would say with hope, if we've managed to build Europe with Germany, which was one of our fiercest enemies for generation, there is hope. And I think that when people are talking, when they're exchanging, when they're getting to know each other better, there is hope for the future.
Great.
Steve?
Igor.
Yes, but I would like to mention one thing. I would agree with Yefei Sun that this is a very good conversation, but we talk about here, it's maybe the beginning of many other symposiums, okay, and on different subjects. And I believe we focus a lot on Middle East, and which is quite an important area. But I have a question for Su Shengzhao and Yefei Sun. Still, I would like to go back to China, okay? I would like to ask you, what would your recommendation be for the new administration? How to deal with China? Because, you know, there are many human rights problems with Uyghurs in the country. The Communist Party is dominating. I mean, it's a real problematic situation. Okay, I'm not talking about economy now. I understand economic ties, the advance of Chinese production, and China supplies the whole world, okay, in the United States and Russia and Europe and everywhere. But how do you see, what is your vision about how the new administration should deal? Because we know what the Trump administration did, okay, all this trade wars and so on and so forth. I mean, what is your opinion? Or what's your ideas? Not in general, just to, I would say, cancel all the executive orders of Trump administration. I mean, it sounds unrealistic. I'm sorry. I'm talking about really what should be done. What should be done in practical terms.
Okay,
Before they would answer, I think we are going to close the debate on the Middle East. So we are going to give, before the answer of the people that you ask, Igor, we have the chance to have an ambassador. So we have to give the floor to Yaron to answer what he said before. Yaron?
Thank you, Eric. I will be very brief. Just to relate to what Micheline, but also Cyril were saying. First of all, I think I don't, comparing Israel and Palestine to Germans and French, you guys had a few hundreds of years, if I'm not mistaken, if my history knowledge, I would like to think about hundreds of years of this animosity. I think we should be doing better You know, at least when you look at the vaccination that's going on in Israel, I think we can make things faster in general. But to be on a more serious ground, I just would like to say that with the Palestinians, and I would disagree with Micheline, I think there's a big fatigue with the Palestinian issue in the Arab countries, and not only with the Arab elites. There's a fatigue with the population, and I think the Arab Spring showed us in 2011, and it's not over. We shouldn't think that it's over. The main problem is what's going on in their countries, and I think that the Abraham Accords is the new reality in the Middle East, because we've had diplomatic relations with between Israel and Arab nations, with Egypt in 1979, Jordan 1994. This was a cold peace, what we call it in Israel. With United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, we're going to have, it's not something, it's already in making. You know, tens of thousands of Israelis already visited UAE just in the 3 months after this diplomatic agreement. We've signed multiple agreements on economic and scientific cooperation, exactly what you've said. I think if Shimon Peres was still alive, he would be very happy about this new Middle East that he was dreaming of, and this new model is definitely already there. We just should encourage it. So I don't want to continue, because I really think that there's other important issues, not just Israeli-Palestinian, but also some kind of minor issues like US-China relations. So I would give floor to the others.
So thank you. So now people can answer to Igor.
Let me just intervene, because we're actually running out of time. What I would suggest, what I'd like to see, is a discussion of actually what Mr. Sen raised, which is the instability of the United States, and how one can trust the United States today. And then we'll talk. I'll ask, what do you see as the most important issues for the new administration? And maybe the China issue can come up there. But I have a feeling that our audience is particularly interested in the January 6th events and its implications, because that is real. Just today, there was a statement that came out from the National Security Administration saying that more violence is expected and potentially on the agenda. And the fact of the matter is that in the Senate, we have a situation where it's 51 to 50. And this is 51 for the Democrats, 50 for the Republicans. And we've seen that the Republicans are basically still working in lockstep outside of a half a dozen of them, which is not enough to overcome any filibuster. We've seen that this is going to occur, that this lockstep position is going to occur with the impeachment debate, and it'll occur with any number of other issues. It's already starting with domestic issues in the United States. So I think that Mr. Sen's question, how can you trust the United States under these conditions, is a very good question and deserves some kind of answer. So who would like to begin this?
Can I respond to the question about China? First, for Dr. Zhou and I.
Let's do that later.
Yeah. Okay. Do that later. Okay.
Let's see if we can take on this issue, because this is hard. This isn't an easy question. Micheline, let's start.
Okay, let's start with January 6th. I mean, an insurrection that really shocked the world, not just the American.
Yeah.
Depending upon where they were, left, right, it didn't matter. So even if Biden has discussed about a multilateral position and posturing in the world and liberal internationalism, there are very, very serious issues domestically to tackle. And from the public health, economic impact, the pandemic, to the need to renewed infrastructure investment. Those are big issues. One of the interesting problem that exists prior to the new Biden administrations, way back even when Obama was in power, was the difficulty in popularizing strong foreign policy, engagement to American. That there has been a lingering fatigue over the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then you combine it with growing economic inequality that was exacerbated by the 2008 meltdown, and then the current health crisis. Now, a very large segment of the public does not really see clearly the ties between global cooperation on the one hand, individual security and human rights on the other. And then we have all those the strong isolationists and protectionists on the left and on the right, not just the Republican, on both sides. And globalization, even if it is reform, sort of the argument of Yara Gamber, reform the institutions of international organizations, even were to do that, it still looked from the American perspective like a rich person game in which ordinary people do not benefit anything.
Yeah.
And that will be the toughest sale for the Biden's administration, is to sell to the American people that first and foremost, what you always believe, namely that the domestic well-being of the American is closely intertwined with an effective internationalist foreign policy. And I think that if you succeed in doing that, I mean, better educating about the benefit for them of a leading US role in the world affair, if you succeed in showing the returning of the WHO, what does it mean for American? The returning to the climate change agreement, what does it mean to American? Return to, creating in multilateral renewable energy infrastructural development, what does it mean to the American? I think that is where he will have some inroads.
I'd like to ask Cyril. I'd like to ask Cyril a question. Because my opinion on this is actually more, I don't want to say more radical, I want to say more crude than what Micheline brought up. We're in a situation in the United States where at a minimum half and probably more of the Republican Party thinks that the United Nations is a threat to American sovereignty, that it's part of a general conspiracy to destroy the government, and that if you like, it is what caused the argument is the alternative flag, that UN plus external forces plus Antifa or anti-fascist groups, radical anti-fascist groups, were actually what caused the events in Washington. This is the big projection. We're in a situation in the United States where there's a post-truth society. I think that's what is really crucial for Mr. Sen's comment. It's not just that the rest of the world can't trust us; we don't trust ourselves.
Nobody trusts nobody.
So now the question for Cyril, who has really some expertise in communications and the press, how does the rest of the world respond to this? How are you going to deal with that? Because that's not going away. I mean, at least in my opinion. So if Cyril has any ideas on this, then we can go back to the rest.
What I'm going to do is enlarge the discussion beyond the US. I agree with you that the Republican Party is very divided, but the US has been very, very divided since 2000. For me, the beginning of the shift.
Yes, that's right.
2000, the election between Bush and Gore, which descended into some sort of a dark comedy, and where effectively the Supreme Court intervened and decided that Bush had won and stopped the count. I'm shortening the version.
Quite right.
We move forward. We have the Tea Party. We have Sarah Palin. We continue. We have the new media. You have
everything.
Fox News and the Fox media pushing Trump as a product. And then you end up with someone pushing all the buttons. But beyond that, the same problem exists all over the world. If I take France, for instance, we've had what was called les gilets jaunes, which I'm sure most of you have heard, people wearing plastic, yellow, bright,
Yellow vest.
yeah,
Yellow
vest,
jacket.
which you normally carry in your car when you have a problem. So you are visible. People demonstrated that because they were fed up, because their economic situation was a disaster. And typically the people who did that in France are people who didn't perceive globalization, internalization as an advantage. People who lost their job through transfer of production elsewhere. And the same thing is true in France and in the US. And these people are so lost that they're ready to listen to anyone, even lies. They have stopped believing in politicians. They've stopped believing in mainstream media, and they're going to go on some website or on their Facebook group to try to find their own truth, which correspond to their vision of the world. So what happened in the US has happened in France, it's happened in the UK, and it's potentially one of the reasons we had Brexit. So that problem exists, as far as I'm concerned, all over the world. And the only way to deal with it is to show that that globalization works, that multilateral organizations do work. Unfortunately, we have one of the biggest problems in 100 years with COVID, and we've shown poor capacity to react. To start with, we had problems with masks, then problems with tests, and now problems with vaccines. And there's been little, for most people, it seems that there's been little collaboration. There's been some in Europe, but there's been little collaboration for as far as people are concerned. And therefore they're saying, why us in the US or in France or elsewhere? Why is the world better as a global place, as opposed to us closing our borders and going back to French franc and just dealing with foreign country? So what has happened in the US is what has happened in France also. You had demonstration, fires near the Élysée Palace with destructions on the
I have to
Champs-Élysées.
go now because I have a meeting soon.
Thank you so much for participating. We're really delighted to have you, Sam.
You don't need me. I don't think you need me for this conference.
That's our pleasure.
So what I'm saying by that is the problem exists in the US and it's been pushed to the limit. We've seen what has happened on the 6th, but a few months ago in France, it came very close to this sort of situation. They were, I think the French police and the army was readier to face that situation. But the same thing could have happened. The same thing could still happen because you have huge tension on the fact that people are locked up, their liberties have been reduced because of the pandemic, and you have lots and lots of people who are questioning the decision of the politicians. Does it make sense or not? I mean, when in the US you had Trump not wearing a mask and organizing his MAGA meetings without making sure that people had face masks, it's one way of adding to the disbelief of a portion of the population and and helping them to believe in quote unquote alternative facts.
Let me interrupt for 1 second because I'd like to shape the discussion a bit more radically. I had an old teacher who was very famous. His name was Ernst Bloch. And you probably know on the continent. And he had a friend at the time who was an intellectual, a good friend, who joined the Nazi Party. And Bloch said to him, "What are you doing? I mean, this is completely idiotic. The program makes no sense. They're anti-Semitic. You know better." And the person's response was, "Ernst, you don't get it. One doesn't die for a program that one understands. One dies for a program that one loves." I think that sentiment is there, certainly in the United States. I can't speak for France, but I'll bet it's true. To me, the question is, how does one deal with the passion? And I'm not one of those who believes that you can simply discuss this with QAnon people and the like. And I think what we have to be talking about is how you marginalize them. And without that discussion, we're going to be in a lot of trouble, I think. But I could be wrong. So I turn this over to the rest of you, how you'd like to deal with that.
Can I,
Do you have any ideas on this?
can I say something on this?
Oh, of course. Where are you?
I'm here. I'm
Okay.
just hiding behind the screen. This is my picture. Okay.
Okay.
I think you're right. And right now, too many people, they are fooled by the globalization argument because they see their life suffers. I think for the new administration, need to recognize that on the one hand, the globalization has not worked the way we wished. We admit it has flaws. The Biden administration can tell the marginalized, the Aryan people, those anti-science, anti-choose people, I'm sorry for you. I apologize for whatever we, the mainstream, have done to you. I recognize your pain. That's, you get their sympathy. Then try to win. I'm doing something for America. As he said, I'm the president for all America, not just for the 80 million. And I will try my best to do it. Show you. What can I do for you? Right now, well, you are marginalized. I'm going to help you in certain ways. Deal with your specific concern, not just for the 70 million votes I got. To that not just the marginalize them, that also might win the heart and the will of them, of their wills and the willingness to work with the new administration. So that the radicals, the really, really radical who cannot won by such an argument or posture or actions, and then be it, deal with it. We need to show actions, strong will to deal with them. Not just like the FBI say, the Justice Department say, hey, we have too many criminals who robbed, who got into Capitol. We simply decided not to sue them. That's not right. If that's the approach, that will simply more people, oh, now we have more millions of people can go to the street, do the wrong thing, and they're not going to punish us. Since they're not having enough manpower. That's not the right approach. You show the lenience, but meanwhile, you need to show your toughness. Be tough on those people who have broken the law. Seriously, do it. If you don't do it, more people will follow. That's my approach, suggest to the Biden administration, how to win the heart. Meanwhile, marginalize the really, really the extreme groups. We need to differentiate. We divide that group. We're not just considered as one group. Actually, it's considered lots of layers of groups.
Okay.
And we win the heart of lower groups, just kick out top groups. That's my approach.
Okay. Micheline?
Sorry, yes. I want to go back to what Cyril Julian said before about the Gilets jaunes, the populism that is spreading throughout Western Europe and in the United States. And there's been sort of a calamity across the board, not just in the United States. And because it's a calamity that has occurred across the board, I think it requires international solution, not just domestic solutions. And I would even go further saying that the domestic solution should be intertwined with those international solutions. So there is a long list of urgent challenges. They're not new to the Biden administrations. We know all that. We have to address the pandemic, clear. We have to rebuild trade alliance, even more clear. We have to address the climate change, managing relationship with China, countering the cyber warfare against Western democracy, reversing setback in all those nuclear arms control, pursuing also conflict resolution in the Middle East. We have to address worldwide widening gap, and that is also the core of populism, widening gap between rich and poor, and resolve the refugee crisis. Just that's it, little agenda, right? So these problems are hardly new, but I think that they call a really more broad and more encompassed international solution. And I want to go back to what Yaron Gamberg said before, when he suggests about the reform of multilateral organization. I think that indeed a more robust liberal internationalism will require just that, not the one that occurred in 1989 with Bush, when Bush came to power, after the collapse of the Soviet Union and during the Velvet Revolution, a very thin internationalism at the time, where free trade was sort of elevated and only information technology was really what brought people together. But I'm talking about the one that Cyril spoke before, which is the one of the post-World War II, a much more robust one, and reforming it along the strategical issues of the day. And how would that happen? Not just with passion, Steve Bronner. I think it would require a coalition of democracy, a bloc that bridge human rights, economic and security interests, and it will have to happen in all those illiberal forces that we're facing, not only at home, but also abroad. And so overall, I think that those liberal bloc could become strong partnership with the United States, particularly under the Biden administration. It could coalesce, they could address common challenges, and they could generate a new network of the willing, maybe coaxing or perhaps even deterring illiberal foes like China, Russia, Iran. So I think that will be sort of part of the enforcement stage that we will need. The message is important. The series of crises since the 1990s tell us what the message is, what we need to address already that we accumulated. But we need also mechanisms for enforcement. And without them, it would be very difficult to address both the domestic and the international problem.
God knows I don't believe passion is the way to go. It's the exact.
I like passion, don't worry. I just want to.
No, for myself, quite the opposite. But now we have we're literally over time. So I'd like to give everyone 30 seconds to say what the most important issue is that we have to confront. The single issue that you see as on the table and important to deal with. Igor, let me begin with you.
You took me off guard. I mean, Michelin said so many simple questions, just one here, one there, over there. And the most important thing is really, I would say, still international, it's too broad, international relations. I mean, there is no one focus, there is one world, and we have to work with this world. And the Biden administration should work with the world and not abandoning in any place, neither Asia nor Africa, nothing. And
Mr. Biden has to begin somewhere. So the question is where to begin.
I think I have an answer.
Yes, let me finish just one word. Where to begin? To begin in the United States. Let me put it this way.
Okay.
Start with this country.
Very good. Okay, that may well be the case. Yaron?
Going with what Igor said, and Stephen, this is the best question because you need to drill down to one single thing. So I think if the United States will be able to lead on the response on COVID-19, both in America and outside America, that will be the game changer. This is, I think, and everything else will follow the suit, because now this is the problem number one still. And if United States will be able to take this leadership role in America and outside of it, that will be the answer.
The reason we didn't bring up, by the way, the COVID issue, because we had a conference on it already. So, but okay, fair enough. Micheline, you're going to go last and close up. Cyril, what's the most important issue for you?
I'll think long term. The only way to shift things for the long term, it's knowledge and critical mind, teaching our kids to develop a critical mind, to teach them how to find the right sources of information, to differentiate between real news and fake news, to make their own mind, to become involved citizens. And that applies all over the world. The more knowledgeable, the more critical mind citizens all over the world will become, the better the world will be. But I agree with Yaron that one of the key to the US getting re-engaged with the world would be if they seize the leadership in the fight against COVID. But I think on that point, the US at the moment would have quite a lot to learn from the experience of Israel, which so far has done quite well compared to most countries in the world.
Very nice. Let's see, Eric, where are you?
Hi, I'm here.
Good.
Sorry.
What do you think is the most important issue to deal with?
Hear me? Yes. Okay. So I think for the states, if they want to be a leader, first they have to, the Biden, he must to unify his people. That is the first thing. And the second thing, I'm sure you would be agree with me, they have to teach them, the American pupils and children, they have to learn about the history of them country.
We are going to be doing a conference on that with Igor down the road, which concentrating on the Holocaust or on genocide. But that road is a tough road to bear. 65% of Americans can't name a concentration camp. So let's see, we got one more. Micheline, you'll close up.
Okay, and then I will wrap up most of what people have said, if I have that honor. Pandemic certainly is a pressure cooker. It's a pressure cooker of so many other problems that currently exist and for the past decades. It highlights economic inequities in the world, racial divide. It stress the lack of education and deficit in education, as was proposed here. It also highlights the fact that we are living in an international disorder. And I would like to bring to the attention the following fact. After World War II, international organizations sprout as a result of the lack of delegitimations that existed after World War II, as a result of the lack of information, as a result of even typhoid, the result of so many other things. So it happens that international organizations, when refurbished, when reformed, can provide the legitimacy to weaken states. So those things are not to be seen as mutually exclusive, but on the contrary, there is a room right now, in light of weakening states that are taken and divided by the populations, for international organization to strengthen them as well. So I will leave it on this note, and thank you.
So let me thank everyone for taking part in this conference. I think it went very fast, even though we're over 2 hours. I wish you all well, and I hope you'll participate again with us down the road. So again, I'm Stephen Bronner, for co-director with Eric Goslin for ICBD, and we wish you a good day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
And
Thank
thank you, Eric,
Bye,
and
yeah,
thank you,
thank-
Stephen.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.
Thank you. Nice.
Bye.
Very nice session.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See
Bye.
you
Thank
and
you
take
very
care.
much. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Very nice meet all of you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.